you enjoy what we're doing here on the Underground Footy Podcast, you can show your support, Cash App, TG Young Boys. Either way, sit back and enjoy.
Some come sideways, some come straight way.
Episode 3 of the Underground Footy Podcast. I'm real excited today. I have Kelvin Jones, the director of the Columbus Crew Academy, and we're gonna chop it up a little bit. Hopefully, get some good information out to the folks. And like I said, I'm real excited and blessed to have such great guests coming through, and hope to continue with that. And again, so Coach Jones, are you ready to step on the subway?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
All right. I'm going to start out with the same question I ask everybody. How did you fall in love with this game?
Oh, man, going deep early, huh? It's funny how I got into it. I didn't even want to play soccer when I first got into soccer. My neighbor, who was about a year younger than me, his mom signed him up for rec soccer, and didn't want him to play by himself. So his mom asked my mom if I wanted to play, and I said sure, and just started playing from there. And it was just an opportunity just to get out and run around, basically, for my mom to get me out of the house, mom and dad get me out of the house, and be active. And then from there, I just really enjoyed it. Enjoyed being out in the field.
What age was that?
I was 7.
7.
Okay. Yeah, I was 7. So just enjoyed being out in the fields, running around, and just slowly started to fall in love with the game. That was rec soccer. And I didn't get into what you would call competitive or travel soccer until I was 10. Joined my local travel team down in Fredericksburg, Virginia, at U10, and then stayed with them until I was about U14, and was blessed and fortunate enough to then move up north to Northern Virginia into Braddock Road and play for Braddock Road Warhawks back in the day back then. So yeah, my journey into soccer was one because of my neighbor didn't want to play by himself. So
right.
thank you, Jason Bonner.
Did he continue to play as well?
No, he played for a couple seasons and then got into baseball and golf.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, and as you were coming up, so you actually came into the DMV area. You were at Braddock Road.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
know the area well.
Okay, cool. Because I know, well, I'll get to that later. All right. So then who were some of the players that you idolized growing up?
Idolized? It's funny. I mean, I got into soccer because I enjoyed playing and running around. And back then, soccer wasn't necessarily readily available on TV. But I also came through the era that MLS started up and the heyday of DC United, and being a center back back in my day, you always looked up to Eddie Pope and idolized the player that he was. So growing up in the DMV and just a little bit farther south, and seeing DC United and the runs that they went on, it was hard pressed not to be a fan of Eddie Pope. So I wasn't nearly as tall or athletic, but doesn't mean a kid couldn't dream, right?
Exactly. That's funny because he was my first guest.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Also, next up, I'm just going right into it now. What is, like, the USSDA shut down right around the same time, well, actually the same time that COVID kind of really started biting into the whole environment. And into that vacuum came MLS Next. Now, what are the differences between the DA and MLS Next, even if it's just, is it how they're going to operate? They kind of came out of two different spaces, but they have the same players for the most part, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's a two-pronged question. It's where they're at right now is completely different than what the vision of the club, what the league is, and where they want to be. I still think we're still in the COVID void of the whole country's still not open yet, so it's impossible to know or to see what the true platform is right now. But they for sure stepped into a void that was left by U.S. Soccer, and we're fortunate enough to be a part and have the entity of the MLS step in and take leadership in it. Being a part of it and at this level now, when we were in the DA, I was more of a coach and not on the director side of things. So knowing the ins and outs, I didn't know, but it seems the approach that the MLS is taking right now is it's really eliciting the buy-in from all clubs, whether it's the MLS clubs or the elite clubs that are part of the platform, and truly wanting to move soccer together forward rather than a governing body eliciting and dictating the way things should be played. They have their initiatives that they want to move forward, but they also take advice and leadership from not only just the MLS directors, but also the elite club directors, and how we're going to move this thing forward.
Okay, now obviously, I deal a lot with parents, with my organization, PG Young Boys, and so some of the questions that we're getting are they're trying to sort out, like, okay, some of these clubs are MLS Next. Some of these clubs in our area, we have EDP, we have ECNL, right? These platforms are not obviously working together, but what is it that a parent, what do you guys look for? And I know you can only speak for Columbus. Mm-hmm. What do you look for in a player when you're trying to say, okay, we'd like to bring him into not just MLS Next, but actually into your academy?
Yeah, it's a good question. First and foremost, you kind of want to gauge what the level, what the player wants. It's as much as it's an interview process for the kids to whether or not we're the right fit for them. We've also got to figure out whether or not they're the right fit for us. And it's asking that player what they want out of the game. Do you want to be a pro? Do you understand what that process is? Do you understand that the vast majority of the people, the players that are in this environment, aren't going to be pros? And what we love about what we do here is, yes, we're trying to produce pros for the first team or to produce homegrowns or professionals, period. But it's also how do we set these kids up for success in life after soccer? Yes, to be successful in soccer, but at some point soccer is going to be over. So what's the type of person that we are creating here in the club that's going to set that person, that player up for success? So as we look for these kids, it's making sure it's a good culture fit before it's a good soccer fit. If it's not a good culture fit, then we're going to bump heads along the way. And there's always going to be disagreements in the development of a player from parents. But as long as we're on the same page, first and foremost, is what the expectations are from the player, but also as the club, then we can move forward in the right direction. So a kid that's humble, a kid that's coming in understanding that it's a process and there's going to be ups and downs in that process, but is willing to work with us through that process, through the ups and downs, and understand that at the end of the day, we want what's best for the kid. Okay.
Now, sometimes when you see, players come in, and obviously at this point, I mean, like, I'm on Twitter and you see that certain players are kind of pushed out there, whether it be through the parents, whether it be through the punditry and so on. I mean, especially at very young ages. Now, when these kids come into these academies, do you guys kind of say, okay, well, this one we feel has a higher ceiling, or do you kind of just, once you've decided a player is a fit, that you see who rises to the top? Or do you don't tag someone immediately upon seeing them? I mean, obviously very young ages, it would be difficult anyway, but do you feel like everyone gets a fair shot at becoming a pro at Columbus?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's different through the ages. I think any MLS academy be foolish to say that they don't recruit the higher level talent to bring in. So certain players that you bring in, you project out to be at a higher level coming in than others. But at the same time, when they get here, they're on the same footing as everybody else. Everyone that's in this academy we are dedicated to developing, and we understand that every player develops at their own rate. So we've got to understand that. At the younger ages, our induction age is U14, and we've been fortunate enough to kind of grow our program down in pre-academy into younger ages now to build a better pool of players to feed into the academy. But it's identifying those players that are obviously good soccer players, technically inept on the ball, but they're also a good culture fit. And to be able to introduce our methodology and our culture at a young age helps us to continue to push players along in the pathway. So once a kid is here, yes, you have just about every possibility to make it as everybody else. When you get here, it's up to you. We tell these kids every day, and I kind of got into the 19s the other day after the match about this. We are here to guide you. We're not here to make you. You will make yourself if you want to. You are given the resources to be a good player, to be the best player that you potentially can be within our environment. What you do with those resources is up to you. We will help guide you along the way, but you have to be willing to take the feedback and reflect on your game and put in place the processes that we have here to make sure that you're on the right path.
And what's the scouting process? I mean, how do you find players? Like, let's start with in Ohio. Mm-hmm. What is your relationship with the clubs locally, or do you do you bring them in? How do you find those top guys from Ohio?
We are fortunate now to have leadership and ownership that is invested in the club. And recruiting previously was tough. We didn't have the resources in terms of manpower to be able to go out and to identify players. And the way relationships were in the past have kind of been a detriment to actually identifying the top players here in Ohio and in the region. So we have a goal and a mission to own our environment, to own the region, and to truly identify the top kids in the region. And part of that process is reaching out and developing relationships with the clubs, whether the top club or the lower level clubs, all clubs here in not only in Columbus, but in the region that we have. Our best scouts are the directors of these clubs. They know their kids better than we can. We can go out and see these kids in their training sessions or in their matches, and we can have a glimpse of what they look like. But these directors are with these kids day in and day out and truly know how these kids are. So the more relationships that we can grow and develop within our region helps us grow the quality of soccer within the academy. Like I said, we're fortunate enough to expand our programming down to the pre-academy ages, and we have a bigger pool of players that we've identified. And that truly has come from identifying and developing relationships with the clubs here in and around Columbus, reaching out and asking them what they need and helping them understand that they're part of this process as well. It's not us coming in and dictating you what needs to be done. We have a vision of where the club wants to be, and these clubs are a big part of that vision if we're doing it right. So then you go outside of the region. It's developing relationships. You've got certain markets and clubs that you have identified as top clubs, and you've identified relationships with, and those clubs are more willing to send their players to you if there's a relationship. On top of that, you then grow out your recruiting department and your scouting department to go out to certain events or go out into certain regions that have a high density of kids that you can get identification and eyes on. So from bottom here in grassroots all the way to identifying kids nationally, we're still building out that process in that department, but we are farther along now than we have been in quite some time.
Okay, one of the things that I've always noticed was obviously in travel soccer, you have a lot of what do you call it? Tryout season, right? Mm-hmm. Now, something that I've noticed is there's also like in a more professional environment, at the older ages in particular, it's more of a trial situation. What are the differences for people who don't know between a tryout and a trial?
Yeah, a tryout for me, it's the identification of a larger pool of players and then identifying the best players within that pool of players. So for us, we don't necessarily call them tryouts. We more call them combines, where we bring in a pool of kids that we've identified to come into a training environment and compete against each other and then identify the top kids from there. So once we've identified the top kids from there, it's then bringing them into our environment, our training environment, and see how they do. So tryout / combine for me, it's identifying a pool of players to bring in. And we typically do that at the younger ages because, again, we want to build and cast a wider net. And there are our base programming. A trial is the identification of a top kid that you want to bring into the environment for an extended period of time. And that's typically what we do at our middle to older ages because we have a pool, a dedicated pool of players that we've dedicated the development to. And we're from that point, we're only identifying 1 or 2 kids to bring in each year to help round out or to better the pool. So that trial will last a couple days, or that trial may last a couple weeks, depending on who the kid is and the relationship that we have with the club. But for me, that's the distinction between the two.
Okay. So the other thing, you've got a unique perspective in as much as you've played in maybe not the bullseye of the DMV, but you definitely played in you're familiar with this area. I believe you worked out of Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they located again?
Right in the middle of Richmond and Virginia Beach.
Okay, so they're in between the two places.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is unique to the Columbus soccer scene?
We're on a little bit of an island. Like you've got 100 clubs within 15 miles in DC, Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland, if more. And the population and the density of kids is unbelievable. Here in Columbus, there's a large pool of clubs. But once you get outside of Columbus, you've got smaller towns that have their clubs here and there. But the next densely populated pool of kids is you go to Cincinnati, you go over to Dayton, you go over to Cleveland or to Pittsburgh. And the closest trip there is an hour to 2 hours, and Pittsburgh being 3 hours. So the landscape is much more spread out. So the identification of top talent becomes a little bit more difficult because it's spread out as well.
But at each age group, what do you expect out of your academy? What is it that you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's first and foremost, the youngest age, well, let's say all ages. Let's be honest. The reason why these kids play the game is because they enjoy the love of the game and have fun. So at all ages, we just want to make sure that the kids are still enjoying it, but also throughout the progression of their age groups at the academy, there's a level of professionalism that you develop. So at the youngest ages, obviously the player has to be technically enough to be successful within the match and the level of competition, but the sheer joy of the game. You watch our U14s coach Matunda out with that U14 group, and they've come a long way from where they were at the beginning of the year. They've gotten better at soccer, but you can see the joy that they have when they're out there playing, win, lose, or draw. So as long as we can continue to keep that as the foundation, we're on the right path. As they get older, it's about the different benchmarks of maturity and the development, not only within soccer, but also as young children maturing into young adults. So at the middle ages, it's understanding the model, the U15s, it's the game model at which we play, understanding your role within the game model, but then also understanding the individual group dynamics that happen at that age group, because a lot of these kids are just beginning puberty or just at the beginning stages of puberty, and it's very hormonal. So understanding the small group dynamics and the relationships between there at U15. When you get to U17, you can become a little bit more specialized in your role. What does it mean to start to understand to be a professional, the increased training that you have, And then also your understanding of an individual within the collective game model as well. What can you bring to the game to make the group to be successful? And then at 19s, you're closer to the professional game than you ever have been. So hopefully a lot of these kids are getting the opportunity to be in a first team environment, train with the first team, understand what it is to be like to be a pro. Those that aren't at that level yet, it's understanding what the college pathway may be for them as well. So again, there's a process from early ages, but at the root of it, it's the joy and the excitement that they have of being a soccer player.
Yeah. Now I saw on Twitter where several of your players went off to camp with the first team, and so the reasoning behind sending your academy guys in with the first team. I mean, do they train with the first team during the year as well? I mean, obviously during COVID, it's kind of changed some dynamics, but if it's a regular year when things kind of clear up some, and also, like I said, how did it come about that, is that something that all the clubs do? They take their academy guys. I mean, I follow you guys, and I follow a few other clubs, but
yeah,
I don't know obviously everything. But so how did you guys come about deciding to take those guys?
Yeah, it's always been a philosophy here at the club of giving those kids that are close to being ready to the first team the opportunity to experience a first team preseason. And some of the guys that have gone haven't really played too much or trained too much, but we also knew that going in because it's about the experience that they're going to get being around professionals and what the professional game looks like and how they approach their approach to training and team development and all those things. So it's really important to us to continue to also show that there's a pathway to the first team for all the players, and to have so many kids in a first team environment is special. So we're fortunate enough to have Caleb and Pat and Bez and Corey and those guys that believe in that pathway and giving the kids the opportunity. And I think you're right in terms of right now, COVID it's tricky. These 6 kids at some point in the last few years have been in a first team training environment. But this was the first time in a year that they've been in that environment because of COVID. But previously, prior to that, I think Caleb's first year, there were close to 15 kids that were in and out of first team training at some point throughout the year. So we're blessed that Caleb believes in the academy pathway to the first team, and we're blessed to have Pat and Bez that believe in that as well. So in a normal year, if the kid is ready or close to being ready, or we think that they need to be challenged a little bit, we have the pathway of a first team training or first team preseason that we can get these kids some experience.
Now, another thing that we've been noticing is that there seems to be a lot more with the homegrown signings, and also it seems like there's a lot of kids that are going overseas as well. And I mean, for most of us looking at it from the outside, we're like, this is great because it's creating pressure to develop players. Whether you are, like I said, a domestic league like MLS, or it seems like it's a lot of foreign scouts and whatnot trying to seek things out, as well as I'm sure the amount of video and everything that's available makes it a lot easier for them as well to kind of see what's going on. How do you feel about dealing with the do you feel like that's good for soccer overall?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime that your environment is developing kids that can play at the top level overseas, that you're doing something right. So to some extent, it's a litmus test to see how your developmental process is working. So I think it's only great for the game. It brings up a different model of development as well. When you've got players that you're selling for $6, $7, $8 million, that money can then be push back into the academy in hopes of producing more players, you may be more inclined to continue to build that pathway out and hopefully producing more players. Obviously, the goal is to hopefully produce players that contribute to your first team. But at the end of the day, it is also a business. If you can produce players that can produce not only just championships for the club, but revenue for the club at some point, then that's a model that you can look back at and say it's been successful.
So does Caleb come out to the and watch the kids sometimes, or how do the first team guys, do they take you guys' recommendations? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, pre-COVID, first team guys would come out every now and then. Ben Cross would come out more often than anybody else. He was former U19 coach here in the academy, and obviously he still has ties with guys in the academy. So pre-COVID, he would come out as much as he can. Caleb would pop out every now and then. When we train at the first team facility, it's more likely that those guys will pop out and watch training. Pat Onstead, the technical director, would even during COVID last year would pop out at the fields and watch first team training. But I would imagine as we move into the new facility, that will probably end up being a regular. We'll have more eyes on us, what we do as a staff, but also more eyes on the players and how they're progressing as well. So when we talk about players moving into first team environments and training environments, they take the recommendation from the staff. Then we have a conversation about it and why they should be or why they shouldn't be.
So when are you getting your new facility? When are you guys going to be blessing the
June, beginning of June. Finally. Huh? Finally, yeah.
So those kids will actually be seeing the pros as they come and go.
Yep.
Well.
Yep. Everyone will be under the same building.
All right. So like, how do you select coaches? I mean, what is it that you look for in an academy coach? What are the expectations of your academy coaches? I mean, these guys are working hard, I would assume. So what is it that you tell them when somebody comes for an interview, you're like, this is what's expected?
Yeah. I guess a little bit of recency bias because we just finished that process of looking for a new head coach now. And this is my first time doing it because I just assumed the position in September. And the current staff that we have now was assembled by our previous academy director, Dennis Sanchez. And he did a fantastic job of identifying not only good talent, but good people. So my goal was to continue that. It's people first, and then what and will obviously help us grow what we do here. But it's first and foremost, it's what kind of person are you? So what we always ask, and I think all of our current staff have a story, and it's the question that I asked all the candidates that we put through the process. It's what do you want out of soccer? Why are you in soccer? And everyone here is the underlying explanation for them. It's to some extent, it's the lessons that I've learned along the way. I want to be able to teach back to the kids, good, bad, at all different levels. We got coaches that played at a lower level D3, and we've got a coach that's played in all the top leagues in Europe, and all stops in between. So the experiences, the variety of experiences that we have in the staff is kind of what we pride ourselves on and what we enjoy. And everyone, it's an environment where everyone has their own piece of how this project moves forward. They can develop their own voice and use their experience and harken back on their experiences to help not only teach the kids, but also the staff itself.
And one of the things I noticed, and I guess it became more apparent. I mean, obviously, these times have been pretty turbulent, but it seems like Columbus Crew really embraces diversity. And I just wanted to know, what was the approach the organization took, following the killing of George Floyd and just all of the things that came after it? Because obviously, sports is kind of a reflection of society, and it's not like you can just move on like, okay, we're not dealing with that, we're just doing soccer over here or whatever. So I mean, and I know the answers to some of this because I followed it, but I just want to know what was the edict that came down from the top as far as dealing with everything that was going on at that time?
Yeah, it was. We had deep discussions as an academy staff on it, and just at our level, just the temperature of the country, where we were at, and how we got there. And like I said, a little bit. Hold on, what's that? You can say those for later. Yes, my youngest. But like I said earlier, it's setting these kids up to be successful in life, not just soccer. So what are the lessons that we can teach along the way? And again, what are the experiences that each and every one of us have had along the way to help move these kids along? So initially, after all of this, after the riots and us reflecting as a staff, we're thinking about what's some programming that we can do within the academy. And Matunda, our U14 coaches, it's got a pretty long history within social justice, and social justice is his passion. And like I said, as far as staff development, everyone's got their say in how we move this project forward. And he was really passionate about putting some programming together on how we move this forward. So we put some programming initially together that didn't necessarily take root, but it started a conversation. And that's what most of this is about. It's just being able to have a conversation. So kids are talking, the staff is talking, and how do we continue to move the conversation forward instead of letting it lose steam? And unfortunately, a couple of months back, we had an incident on the field with a player calling one of our players not very polite name. And it's an unfortunate event, but we as a staff took it again as a moment to bring the conversation back up. And we had some really, really deep conversations with our 17s and 19s. I think to an extent it may be above the 14s and 15s heads. But we had some really, really deep conversations addressing some of these things with our older age groups. And Matunda did a really good job of artfully navigating through it and allowing players a safe space to speak their stories and to ask questions. It's a difficult subject to cross. And especially when you've got 40 some odd kids that come from different backgrounds and aren't comfortable expressing themselves. And what I hope we have done is created a dialogue within the club that will continue to move forward with these players as we move on. And like I said, it was an unfortunate event, but it was an event that really kind of spearheaded us moving forward with the conversations within the club.
Okay. Now I'll shift a little. I remember when the DA first started, and my oldest boy, who's now playing in college, I was trying to figure out what they were doing. And so I saw where they had let's say their principles of play, where they were going to play a 4-3-3 across the board, with, I believe, the thought being, okay, national team, everybody be able to integrate because everyone's playing the same formations. As time went on, I saw it evolve, and it became more like real football in the rest of the world, which means you bring kids up in the system that you've decided on, your principles of play. So for you guys, what are the principles of play? This is for my coaches. They wanted to know what is it that you aim for? What are
it's yes, you can have some dessert. Yeah. I think when people ask that question, I think they're looking for like the magic pill that solves all problems. But our principles of play, like how they're outlined, are universal to anybody. How you interpret them depends on your club, your organization, your team, and how we look at our principle. First of all, how we look at the game. It's players have to make decisions within the game. So how can we help guide players' visions, thoughts, and helping them interpret the game and helping them break down the game? So simply, our principles of play are designed on how, depending on the phase of play that we're in, how we break down the opposition's lines. And the simple language that we use is when you break down any opponent, you're either looking to go over the opponent, you're looking to go around them, or you're looking to break lines and go through. So we've broken down our principles of play in the phases of play in those three areas. And then the language that we use on the field is we harken back to those three ways to break down the opponent and helping the kids understand any given moment how we break down the opponent.
Coaches want to know, and everybody's trying to figure out this key to how are players going to get better in the U.S. and how we're going to get them out there. And I mean, and I can respect that. You know, of course, we want to be successful across the board, but again, you know, it's just looking at that because, you know, you hear the kids, they just want to play ball. And so something that I've seen happen before, and I assume that you do this on purpose, but I wanted to kind of get this out to the parents. Sometimes coaches put players in situations where they got to figure it out. Is that fair to say? Like,
absolutely,
you throw them a surprise that they didn't get in practice, and you say, "Hey, we're gonna do this, or we're gonna pick them up at half field. We're gonna press. We're gonna, you know, whatever it is." I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to simplify it, when you're looking at the individual player, we all know stories of the kid that was big, strong, and fast at the younger age and just dominated play. And when they got older and everybody caught up, they struggled. It's because they were comfortable and successful at doing one thing, and they were never put in situations where they then had to problem solve in a different way. And by the time that they did, they were unable to. So that's the art of coaching, really. It's putting your kids in situations where they have to problem solve. The game is the player's game, and the situations that come up within the game are up to the players to decide. What we do in training and practice is hopefully prepare them for the decisions that they make in the game. So we put them in situations, repeatable situations, so they can problem solve. And then if they become successful in certain actions, then we put them in different situations where they have to problem solve in different actions. So at the end of the day, on the weekend, when the match is ready, us as coaches, we have set up our model of which we want to play, and we basically roll the ball out and play. It's 11 players, hopefully on the same page, problem solving together. There's only so much that we can do on the sideline as coaches. We can change formations and we can fix a couple things tactically. But at the end of the day, the decisions that happen on the field come from the players, and hopefully we're putting them in situations day in and day out where they're having to make decisions and problem solve. If they're not, then they're not progressing, they're not developing.
Okay, all right. And I'm gonna tie this up with this. How would a potential player engage Crew Academy if they wanted to get an opportunity for you guys to see them, or you know, what would be the process?
Yes, different levels. First, I hope that the player, the family has a good relationship with their coach or their club director, and they're comfortable having a conversation with them that they're looking to go to the next level. And hopefully that club director is willing to reach out to us as a staff and say, hey, we've got this kid that we think that you may be interested in, and we're always open to giving shots. If you don't, we have an online intake portal on our website under the Academy recruitment page that people can submit basically their CVs and any match highlights or match film that they have. And Nate has done a fantastic job of whittling through that every day and selecting kids and selecting players. And then from there, it's also us doing our due diligence and doing our job to make sure we get eyes in the right environment on the right kids. So if you've come through the portal and we've talked with your coaches and we're willing and ready to move forward, then it's on us to get eyes on you and to make sure we're either coming to your environment where you're at, your training sessions, your matches, your tournaments, or we're inviting you into training. we're an open door. I was talking to a coaching colleague earlier today. I got an opportunity to be here when I may not have been qualified to do so, but somebody gave me the opportunity. And whether it's for coaches or kids, we want to give kids the opportunity that they may not normally get. I don't know if you know, on our U14 team, we found 2 kids that are on the team now that has really never really played organized soccer. We found them, identified them through a school spirit day that we did this time last year, and went to their community center, saw them play, and said, hey, let's give these kids an opportunity. So it's about giving these kids access to the game and making sure that we can help grow the game as much as we can, and getting eyes on the kids and allowing and empowering these coaches and these directors to be comfortable reaching out to us.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for taking this time. I know you're eating dinner and all kinds of stuff like that, but thanks for taking this time and coming on the Underground Footy podcast. And, like I said, it's just getting information out. We're gonna see if our next guest can match up with our first 3, and we'll keep it rolling. All right. Thanks for your time, Coach.
Thanks, Mo. Happy to be here.
All right.
All right.